I am really parched for some reason. I don't know why, and my voice is like all scratchy, so if that gets annoying, I apologize. I don't know what's going on. I know I didn't post a video last week. I'm sorry. I was on vacation. It was absolutely wonderful just to get away from the state and to get away from work and to just get a break and spend time with my family. It was fantastic. So if you haven't been on a vacation recently and you can give yourself one, I highly recommend because it will do wonders for your mental health. I have some projects that are in the works from being on vacation, so stay tuned for those because this will be coming out at some point. But to just kind of get back into the swing of things, I thought that I would share a story with you guys. I don't know if it's something that many of you will find interesting or even really care about, but it's something that I know a lot of people have experienced. Practically every person that I've ever talked to has had an experience like this, and I thought that I would share mine because it scared the ever-living daylights out of me, and it's something that I still think about from time to time and kind of still freaks me out. So here we go. Sleep paralysis, for those of you who don't know, is a state of mind that can occur when you are asleep, and basically your body stays asleep and your mind wakes up, and there's like a disconnect there between your brain and your body thinks you're asleep and your brain thinks you're awake, and you can kind of almost still be in a dream state, and a lot of freaky stuff can happen. And it's one of those things that, as far as I know, is kind of still not super well understood. People think that it happens because you're either stressed out or not getting adequate sleep, or there's something in your life that you're not dealing with and it kind of interrupts and impacts your quality of sleep. And I think that's definitely true for me. I think it's true for everybody that I've ever talked to. But as to what exactly is going on there and why, I think it's still kind of one of those things that's kind of a mystery and that maybe scientists don't really understand that well. If that's wrong, feel free to correct me. I'm always open to learn new facts, but everything I've always heard, it's still kind of like an unknown. So I thought I would share my sleep paralysis story just because it's interesting, and I thought, why not? So back in 2016, I was living in Cuba, and this was shortly after I had my epiphany experience, which, looking back on it now, after I had that, was kind of when a lot of things started to happen, because I think I was processing and going through and evolving and dealing with some things, so naturally stuff was bound to come up and impact me in some way. Plus, I was working nights at the time. It was the first time I'd ever worked a night shift, which, if you've never done that before, trying to sleep when everybody else is awake and then trying to stay up when everybody else is asleep, it feels incredibly unnatural, and it's really, really difficult, especially if you're not used to it, which I was not. And not only that, but I was dealing with work stuff, trying to adapt to a new work environment, and yeah, I was dealing with some stress, and I think that that is why this occurred. And there are some other things that I think probably impacted it as well, but I'll get into that later. So let me try to paint a mental image for you so you'll have an idea of what the situation was like. So my boyfriend at the time, we will call him Steve, he would go to work during the day. So while he was at work, I would be at his place sleeping. And he would usually get home from work around like 4:30 or so in the afternoon, and that was around the time that I was waking up and getting ready to leave. So we would have like maybe 20-30 minutes to kind of like wave and say hi before we went our separate ways. It wasn't great, but we made it work. And honestly, it was okay because I had a great place to sleep, so I didn't mind it too much. His room was set up to where you would walk in the door, and over to the left was his bed, like right against the wall, and then like a night table and a chair, and then a couple of closets against the wall opposite. And then on this side was like his entertainment center, and then the wall went straight back to like a little hallway, and then there's a fridge and the kitchen cooking area, and then on the other side of that hallway was the bathroom. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's basically how his room was set up. So the bed was right next to the door. And so that meant that anytime he would come home from work, if I was still asleep, I would know it right away, because the way the doors were set up, they were kind of really heavy for some reason, and there was this weird rubber ceiling all around the edge of it. And so when somebody would open it, it would make this weird like suction sound, like a suction being broken. I don't know how to describe it other than that, but that's basically it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it would make a very distinctive sound, plus, you know, the door handle being open, so you would know when someone was coming in. And so I don't know what time it was. I think it was sometime in late afternoon, so around 2 or 3. And I was laying there asleep, and I know I was on my back. And I heard a sound in the room, kind of like on that side where the door is. So I thought, oh, Steve must be getting home from work, like he's about to come in the room. And I was trying to like stay asleep and get as much sleep as I could before I had to wake up and go to work. So I was not trying to wake up and interact with him too much. I just thought, okay, whatever. So my eyes were still closed, I was still asleep, I didn't think anything of it, I really didn't hear too much else after that, and I don't know how much time passed, but all of a sudden, I felt the bed depress on either side of my feet, kind of like, you know, if someone sits down on a bed or a couch next to you, it'll like depress, or like if a pet jumps up, like, you know how that feels. And I thought maybe it was Steve. I thought maybe he was getting into bed with me. Sometimes if he didn't have a bunch of stuff that he had to do, or if he could get cleaned up super quick, he would come and cuddle me for a little while before I had to wake up and go to work. So I thought maybe it was just him crawling up into bed with me. Although starting at my feet was a weird way to go about it, since the rest of the room and like everything that he would have been doing was on this side, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time. All I knew was that all of a sudden the pressure on each side started to make its way up my body, and I was laying there and my arms were at my side, and all of a sudden this feeling of absolute dread washed over me. And I think it was at that moment that I became aware of the fact that I couldn't move, that I was paralyzed, and I was just locked there laying on my back, and I felt the pressure, the presence, whatever it was, move up either side of my body until hands, I guess, were like at my shoulders or on either side of my head, and then feet or whatever were like somewhere on either side of my like thighs or waist or something. Really freaky. And I became aware of a presence like right in front of my face, and I don't know how to I don't know how to describe it, but if you've ever been in a situation where you've been playing like blind man's bluff or something like that, where you're blindfolded and someone's like right in front of your face, you can kind of sense that. And it was that same kind of feeling. Like I felt like something was right in front of my face, and I couldn't move and I couldn't look away, and all of a sudden now I couldn't breathe, and I felt like I was suffocating. And obviously my eyes were closed. I couldn't open them and see whatever was going on, but I had an idea in my mind for some reason that whatever it was this very sinewy, smooth, gray thing with teeth and like a very smooth face. There's been like monsters in TV shows and movies that I've seen that like remind me of this thing. If I can find them, I'll put one over here. But that was kind of what I was imagining, and it was terrifying, and I just felt like it was staring at me, like it was just watching me, and I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. And I was thinking to myself, if I can just turn my head away, I can break whatever this is and I'll be okay. Like that's what was going through my mind. And I don't know how long it went on that I was like locked there. Probably not that long at all, but it felt like an eternity. And then finally, for whatever reason, sheer force of will, because I was trying so hard, I was able to whip my head to the side and open my eyes, and everything like went away. I was able to breathe again, I was able to move, I was able to look around the room, and I sat up and I was like gasping for breath. And I remember the sunlight was coming in around the blinds over from the window over to my right, and like the room was empty. I was the only one in it. Obviously, like everything was fine, and I didn't know what had happened. I don't think I went back to sleep after that. I don't think I could have. I think by that point anyway, it was about 3:30 or 4 o'clock, so I would have had to have gotten up anyway, and I decided to just do that because there was no way I was going to go back to sleep, because that had been absolutely terrifying. And I didn't have any idea what it was. I'd not heard of sleep paralysis at that point. So Steve got home from work while I was getting ready, and I remember telling him about it, and he was like, yeah, it sounds like sleep paralysis. And this is kind of getting into what I was talking about before with, you know, other things impacting it as well. Steve was dealing with a lot of stuff in his life. He would have issues with having night terrors and nightmares because of things that had happened in his past. I think he also dealt with sleep paralysis, and because I was around him constantly, and because of the fact that I was beginning to awaken and become more aware and more empathetic and more just in tune with everything happening around me, I think it's very probable that whatever was bothering him, whatever dark energy, whatever negative stuff was bothering him, started to bother me as well. And I think that it may have culminated in that point with that experience. And that's just a theory that I have. Of course, there's no science to substantiate it. Any scientist would tell you no, it was just because you were on a weird schedule and you hadn't been sleeping well and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know that, but you know, I always think with these things, especially when it has to do with sleep and dreams and everything else, that a lot of times there's something more to it. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you think if you feel differently. But yeah, that was the sleep paralysis experience that I had. And thankfully, at least up until this point, I haven't had another experience like that. That was the only time. I've had some pretty terrifying nightmares and some pretty weird experiences, but as far as sleep paralysis is concerned, that was the only time I've had an experience like that, and I am very thankful for it because it was intense and way more than I am willing to deal with on a regular basis. So luckily, I've never been the kind of person that has been like an active sleeper, like, you know, aside from like the normal like nightmares and bedwetting stuff that happens when you're like a little kid. None of that stuff has carried over into my adult life until more recently when I've started to have like really, really vivid dreams and that kind of thing that really I think just has to do with where I'm at in my life with my spirituality and my level of awareness and everything else. And I think that that night terror experience, sleep paralysis experience, has a lot to do with that. That's just my opinion. So, yeah, pretty crazy, pretty intense. If you've had an experience like that, I'd like to hear about it. I think they're really interesting. Everybody that I've ever talked to, their experiences are slightly different, but they all have like the same kind of theme where like can't move, paralyzed. Sometimes people see things, sometimes they don't. I didn't, but I feel like in this instance, not seeing it was more terrifying than if I had seen it. So I guess it is what it is, but that is my story time for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead and give this video a like if you did, or don't subscribe if you haven't already. I love it when people subscribe. I see every single one of you guys and it means the world. But if not, that's cool too. That is it for this video. I will leave all important links and everything else in the description down below so you can go and check them out. And yeah, I will see you guys soon for the next video. There's like a weird line here from the blinds in front of me, so I apologize if that's been distracting. There's nothing I can do about it. Oh well.